Hey folks, welcome back to Mark Kelly Farms. We're finally going to do the basic framing video that we promised you because the weather's good again. We got snow back on Monday and it's been kind of cold ever since, but now the sun's out, so we're going to get this video done that we promised you. So as you know, we've been working on Kelly's chicken coop here. It's an 8 by 16 structure, and we're going to go over the basic framing of it. As you know, we've been doing this little by little pieces and parts. So this will be the framing, and the next one will cover the rafters up on the roof. So what we're going to talk about is the stick framing here with the 2x4s. Anytime you're doing on a concrete slab, you want to make sure that you have pressure treated lumber down here on the bottom plate, and that's what that bottom piece of 2x4 is called. And then up here you have your sub plate and your top plate, and we'll explain how that works later. So if you have just a wood subfloor, you don't have to use the green treated lumber like this. You can just use standard lumber. And the 2x4s here that you can get 2x4s that are already cut stud length, which is either 92 1/4 or 92 3/8. And what that does, if you're using 8-foot siding, it makes your wall measurement correct here. So you don't have to cut your studs. You can buy them pre-cut. So it allows for the 2 plates on top and the 1 plate on the bottom. And your 8-foot piece of siding will go all the way down and overlap onto the concrete foundation just a little bit, give you a little bit of overlap. So buy your pre-cut studs if you can. If not, you're going to have to cut every single one of them. So the first thing you want to do is lay out your plates. And to do that, you're going to stack your 2 plates together. Normally, if you have the concrete, you'd have the pressure treated plate on the bottom, and this would be your sub plate here. And make sure they're your correct length. If you're doing a wall, you'll have 2 types of wall. You'll have your inside measurement wall, like this end wall here stops right here. And then you have your side wall that continues on 3.5 inches beyond that. So if you're doing your long section of your wall, or however it's laid out, that wall goes all the way to the end. So keep in mind that there's 2 different ones. So this one, we're going to say we're doing an inside wall, which would be this one here that stops short. So this being an 8-foot structure, you're going to minus 3.5 inches for each side. So you're looking at 7 inches shorter than your width of your wall. So you got an 8-foot wall, so minus 7 inches, and that's what your plate would be right here. First thing you want to lay out on your plate is, if you have your plan drawn out, which I recommend that you do, and Kelly drew out a fantastic plan for this chicken house, look at your plan and determine, first thing, where your windows and your doors are going to go and what size they are. So the thing you got to think about on windows and doors is what's called rough opening. If you get pre-hung doors and you buy your windows ahead of time, you can measure those and know what your rough opening needs to be. If you don't know what it is, I highly recommend that you either go online or wherever you're buying your stuff and figure out what the rough opening is before you start laying out your plates. When you're figuring out where to put your doors, always make sure that you leave room to get an anchor bolt. So like in this space, Kelly wanted this door off to one side because she wants to do something here in the corner in this room. So she didn't want to center the door. So you can push it over, but you want to leave enough room so you can get a drill in here to put in your anchor bolts. And we've done that all the way around. Do you see this center door here going into the roosting area? She wanted the door again shoved over to one side of the wall, but we left enough down here to put an anchor bolt, and so on all the way around. Now, building your own building is a little bit different than doing commercial construction, obviously. But there's one thing you can do to save money is you can eliminate some of the studs if you know what kind of siding you're using. So this building here, we're using full 4x8 sheets of siding. So being this is an 8-foot wall, we know that siding is going to splice right here in the center. So this is the important area right here. This is a cripple stud, but if this window wasn't here, this would be a full stud, of course. This is important because this is where your siding splices. So because you're using 4 foot, like this stud here, we could have just centered this in this opening here, and we'd still be well within our measurements. And then we could have eliminated this stud here altogether, because the only thing that stud is there for is to stay on our 16-inch center. But we could have eliminated that stud, again, moved this one over, put it right in the center, and we would save a stud just on this short little wall. And if you do that all the way around the building, just make sure that 4-foot measurement stud is there. You're good to go, because that's where your siding splices. So all of your buildings are either on a 16-inch center or a 2-foot center. Each of those 4 foot ends up a stud. So even on your 16-inch measurement, you're going to have a stud at 4 foot. Your 2-foot stud layout on center, you're going to have a stud at 4 foot. So if you know what kind of siding you're using, you can do that. If it's commercial construction, or you don't know what siding is going to be used, or you haven't decided, you've got to put these studs in here. So say this was a longer wall, say you left this stud out, you get down here to splice your siding and there's no stud here to splice on. So if you don't know, you got to put all of them in. So let's make believe we're laying out this end wall right here. Remember, it needs to be 7 inches shorter than your overall width of the wall, due to your end wall taking care of this 3.5 on the end down here. So it's going to set inside of it. So 7 inches shorter. So we'll make believe this board is the correct length right there. So we know there's a window directly in the middle right here. And the rough opening for this window is 36 inches. So Kelly's going to pull from the left-hand side, and she's going to go to the center of this board. So once she finds center, she's going to go, since the window's 36 inches, she would need to go 18 inches on either side of center and make a mark.
40 would be half. And how many? 13 you said?
It would be 18 inches on either side for a 36 opening.
So 30.
You can use your calculator for this if you can't do it in your head. Kelly's pretty good at math, though. So now that you got those marks, you're going to take your little square and you're going to connect those marks across both boards. Usually we'll screw these two plates together once they're cut at the proper length. And if you're on concrete, this would be a pressure treated. If you're on a wood floor, again, this could be just standard lumber. So now that she's got those marks, she's going to measure 1.5 inches to the left and the right of those marks. You can use a tape measure, or your square also has measurements on it also that you can use. So now she's going to connect those marks all the way across both plates. So now, on the inside of her first mark, she's going to put a T. Because remember, this line is our rough opening, and then she's going to put an X on the other side of those. And then she's going to do the opposite over here. She's going to put a T here, and that means trimmer. And then X is just a standard stud. And I'll show you how that works on this door. Say this is our rough opening here. You have to have a header plate or a header, and this board holds that header up. It rests on this board, and then here's your standard stud. So your rough opening starts here, and that's what we have to allow for is this. And this is called a trimmer. So now she's got her window laid out. So that part is done. Because this is an end wall, we have to put a stud on either end just to connect to the outer wall is all this stud does. So she's going to come to the end of the plate and just put an X on the end of the plate. She'll start there first. So she's going to do the same on the other end. So you get a stud just lined up right with the outside of this. So now we have to lay out for our standard studs. This is a 16-inch layout. Here you can go 2 feet as well on an outbuilding. So let's do 16 just for good measure here. So remember, this is an inside wall. So you either have to hold 3.5 inches over this end, or Kelly, hand me one of those blocks. If we're sitting on something, all you have to do is put a block here on the end and pull from the outer part of the block instead of the end of your plate. So Kelly, hook your tape on this block. And then she's going to go down on a 16-inch measurement. You can see 16 inches is highlighted on the tape in red. So you can either do 16 or 24. 24 is easy because those are on your standard foot marks. So she's going to mark on 3/4 of an inch past that 16-inch mark.
On the wrong side of the tape measure.
To the right. There you go. Now she's going to go down to the next one, which would be 32. And you can see at 32, we already have some lumber there. So we don't have to worry about adding one on the 32. And then the next one would be the 48. So she's going to add that mark 3/4 of an inch to the right side of the 48-inch mark, which is also, you see, highlighted in red because your 16-inch layout also falls on 48 inches. So that works out well for 4-foot siding. And then she's going to go down to the next one. She's going to go 3/4 of an inch to the right of it, because remember, we're allowing for an 1.5 inch piece of lumber. And then she'll go to the next one. Yep, you're good. 64. So go down to the next red measurement again. 3/4 of an inch to the right of it. And there you go. That's good. Now she's going to come back with her square and she's going to connect those marks. We usually have these plates screwed together if they were real plates. We're just doing this for demonstration. These aren't going to be used. And then she'll put an X on the left-hand side of that line. And that'll be on center. So your 16 inches would be here on center of this. So she'll go to the next one and connect that. Now, because that's above and below in a window, that's not going to be a full stud. It's going to be what we call a cripple stud. So she's going to make that line all the way across, and she's going to put a C here for a cripple on both. Now, if you use a header up here, you won't have a cripple stud, but we held this window down a little bit, so we have a cripple stud up here. If you're using just a solid 4x12 header, you wouldn't have that cripple stud, and that window, top of that window would be higher. But this down here is also considered a cripple stud. So now she's going to go down to the next one. And that's within the window as well. So she's going to put a C on that one as well on the left-hand side. And then the next one is down in the regular part of the wall. And that one, she's going to put an X.
On that side?
Yep. So, anywhere there's an X, when you lay this wall out, you'll separate those two plates. You'll put the bottom plate down here and the sub plate up there, just as they're marked. So we would take this one and then set it just like that. So the left-hand side is over here. You lay it down, pull those plates apart, and you start stacking studs between the plates. Everywhere there's an X, you put a stud. Now, most people, when they frame their windows and doors, they'll frame them down on the ground. However, I don't like bending over, so I frame those once I stand the wall up. So I only put in the studs with the X. I leave these out, and I leave the cripples out. I just put a stud where the X's are, and we build the wall. We'll put the studs in there. We'll either nail or screw through here and through the top plate and put that up. And then we'll stand the wall up. Usually I'll do the end wall first, so it'll be already standing, so I can just connect these center walls once I stand them up. I'll do this wall, I'll do the center wall, and I'll do the far wall once I have one of the big walls up. Now you need to think about your order a little bit when you're building and standing walls. I realized after when I went to edit the video that I told you the wrong order on standing the walls. I actually did it differently. I built the one long wall next to the shop, and we stood it up and we moved it off of the slab and leaned it up against the shop. And then we built the other long wall, stood it up, and then I put a diagonal brace from high on the wall down to the concrete form on the outside, so it didn't interfere with the inner walls when I stood those up. And when you do that, leave that wall leaning out just a little bit. You don't want it perfectly tight, because when you go to stand those center walls, they're going to hang up. So when you brace it out just a little bit, and then once you stand the wall, you can kick that brace loose, bring the walls together tight, screw them together. So if you think about the order that you should build and raise those walls, what I would do is build both long side walls, because you have the whole concrete slab to lay it out on. And then you stand that one wall up, the first one that you do, you brace it, leaving the top out wide a little bit. Then you lay the other big long wall out and build it and stand it up. And then I would do the two end walls, because you can build those at the same time or one at a time, and stand those up to the outside, tie all your walls together, or leave those wide for now. And then you can build your center wall just kind of in the middle there. Once you stand it up, you can move it into place there into the middle. And then screw everything together, make sure everything lines up. All the walls line up with the corner channels and all that. Screw it together real good. And then you got it. And then you can just tap it around before you put your anchor bolts in, and you got it licked. After you got it bolted down and where it needs to be sitting, then you can put your diagonal braces in. Now, we talked about diagonal braces if you were using lap siding and not full sheets of plywood. Those braces are actually cut into the 2x4s. They use a 1x4 board, and you'll put it before you put your top plates on. When it's laying down on the ground, you'll put that across, and then they'll run their skill saw down either side of it. Set your skill saw at 1.5 inches and run it along that 1x4, and that'll cut you 3/4 of an inch deep, which your 1x4 is 3/4 of an inch. And then we take our skill saw. It's kind of a pro thing to do. It's hard to do if you're a novice, but you turn your skill saw sideways and you cut those little notches out of the 2x4s, and then you lay that 1x4 in there. It's called a let-in brace. Look up let-in brace. You probably find one on YouTube, a video of doing that. But once you stand the wall and you make it plumb, you just screw all those, the intersections where they intersect the studs, you screw all that together, and then it holds it nice and sturdy. but that's called a let-in brace. They do make metal straps with a bunch of holes in them that just go right across the top of the stud, and you put your sheetrock, your siding, whatever you're using right over the top of that. But keep in mind with the metal strap, it's only rigid in one direction, and that's a pull. So if you use a metal strap, you got to go diagonal both ways, because this one over here will keep it from pulling that way. But if you pull this way, it would buckle and it would allow the wall to rack. So you got to put another one from the other corner to offset that, so it's tight both directions. But I haven't seen those in a long time, and I don't know if they're still using those. But you can do a let-in brace. Again, look it up. You'll find it. Now, the big side wall is basically the same process, but remember your full length. So when you're measuring all of your studs, your windows and all that stuff, start on the left-hand side, and you don't have to allow for a wall because you're going clear to the end. So before you start framing your walls, you need to make all of your connection corners, what we call them. It's basically two studs with a flat stud between them. So what that does is give you a connection point to screw your walls into. So on this building we had 6 of them. So the first thing we did is we built 6 of those corners. There's 2 here, 2 to connect the center wall. It's like a corner channel type thing, and then 2 for the end wall. And right in the center of this wall, you can see how we marked it. We just laid it out for this corner and nailed that in. The rest of it just got regular studs. After we stood the wall up, that's when I framed all the windows and such. And you go off that same measurement. You make your sill plates to fit in between. And when you're measuring for those, don't measure up here where the window goes. Measure down on the plate, or just cut it whatever size your rough opening is supposed to be. And then you have to figure out how high your window's going. That'll determine how long to cut these, all your cripple studs, and allow for your 1.5 for your bottom of your window here. So you would cut these 1.5 shorter where your rough opening needs to be. Now once you get all your walls put together and stood up, you do what's called your top plate. Your top plate connects everything together. So your side walls, you remember, are inside. So your top plate runs all the way over the long wall here on this piece and connects these 2 walls together in an overlapping fashion. It also does it for the center wall. The top plate for your center wall comes all the way out here to the outside to tie it overlapping onto this side wall. So you do that all the way around. You put a top plate all the way around. Anywhere there's a wall connection, you leave a little 3.5-inch opening to tie that wall in. And that's how that works. And then if you're not doing your siding on the building when it's laying down on the ground before you stand it up, once you stand it up and get everything tied together, you have to level the structure or plumb the structure. So get the biggest level you can get. I have a big 6-foot level. Put it here on the end and read it this way to its level. And then you're going to put a brace. That's what this is. The diagonal brace goes clear to that bottom plate. So you put your screw up here first. You have somebody out here with a level, and then the other person will go down here on the bottom where that ties to the bottom plate. And when you get this level, they will put a screw in down there. And that keeps this whole wall from racking like this. Otherwise, there's no structure whatsoever. You can see we did that in the greenhouse over there too. That keeps that whole wall from moving. There has to be diagonal brace. Now, once the plywood siding gets on here, it acts as your diagonal brace, and then those braces come off. But if you're not doing a full plywood wall, say you're doing lap siding, you're going to have to integrate some type of diagonal brace into that wall. But that's what she looks like. We came through later. We didn't put, if you remember the concrete video, we didn't put the bolts into the concrete ahead of time. We came back through and drilled those and did sleeve anchors. You just drill the hole out, drive those anchors in once you get everything square and plumb and where it's supposed to be. Drill the hole, drive those anchors in, and you just tighten the bolt and you're done. Now I left these forms on, so we just put the wall inside the form and we knew where it needed to be. So now we can remove these forms anytime. I just put them out here so we use them for bracing and stuff we could screw to them. But that's your basics of framing. Just come back through and do your window framing like this. You'll see the cripple studs, the top of the door. Some people will put a double plate on the top of the door, but we really don't need it for this application. And then put your trimmer studs in. If you're going to put a regular threshold down here, you can see we cut halfway through that green plate before we laid it down. And so you can come back through with a handsaw and cut the rest of that out, and you're not down there hitting the concrete. So that's a good idea as well. If you have any questions on any of this basic framing, feel free to put them in the comments. It's really not that hard, and you don't need a lot of fancy tools. Just a little skill saw and a hammer and some nails is all you need. So we'll catch you next time when we start doing the rafters, which we're actually doing already, but you'll see it in the next video. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you back here on Mark Kelly Farms.